This is a 41,000 mile review of my 2011 Ninja 250. I bought this bike when it had about 1,000 miles on it, and I put roughly 41,000 miles on it, so now it has about 42,000 miles. This review will be especially useful for people who want a nice looking bike for a relatively affordable price. You can get these bikes on Craigslist for about $2,500 with low miles. So let's talk about my overall impressions of the bike. My overall impression is this bike is pretty awesome. I'm really impressed by what this bike has been able to do and the reliability of the bike. And let's first talk about reliability. That's the most important thing when it comes to any car or truck. Doesn't matter how fancy it looks, if it's not reliable, it's junk. So the question is this bike reliable? And I would give a resounding yes. I would give about a 9 out of 10 as far as reliability on this bike. The reason that I can't give it a 10 is I did have two problems, but that's not too bad considering I put 41,000 miles on the bike. One of the problems was the bike backfired and a hose came off and the bike lost compression, but that was a quick fix. It wasn't a big problem. Basically, just put the hose back on. But the second problem was more serious. That it was an electrical problem, and the bike only ran on one cylinder, and I broke down on the freeway. I think that problem could have been avoided, though, because I heard something about a recall. I never really confirmed it. I don't know where on the Kawasaki website you would look for this stuff. I didn't feel that it was easy to find this information. But I do believe you can find information about recalls, and it's something that could have been avoided. Apparently a wire rubbed up against something, and it caused the wire to fail, and it only ran on one cylinder. I'm not 100% sure what the problem was. It maybe just a wire came out of the spark plug cap, because the wires just kind of fit into the spark plug cap. They don't really snap into place, which you would think is kind of unreliable, but amazingly, I haven't had a problem with that in 41,000 miles, other than maybe that one problem. But the most annoying thing about it was that it happened to be riding season. The mechanics were swamped in my area, so it ended up taking 3 weeks for the bike to be fixed. But other than that, it wasn't a huge problem. So given 41,000 miles, I think that's pretty good as far as reliability. This bike runs in hot weather, it runs in cold weather, and I'm pretty amazed by what it's been able to do. And that brings us to the second thing that I want to talk about, and that is freeway riding. A lot of people will just assume that a 250 can't handle the freeway. And those are really just assumptions. Anybody who owns one of these bikes and has actually tried to ride it on the freeway knows that these bikes do fine on the freeway. I can't speak for the third generation Ninja 250, but this bike, the fourth generation Ninja 250, it really does not have a problem on the freeway at all. As far as passing power goes, the top speed of this bike, I'm about 200 pounds, 6 feet 2, and the top speed of this bike is 91 miles per hour. So given that the speed limit is about 65 or 70, you can see that that's really not a problem. I drive this bike on the fast lane all the time. That's the lane that I'm always in, and I can tell you that I'm usually passing cars all the time. So don't let somebody tell you that these can't run on the freeway. Of the 41,000 miles that I've put on this bike, I would say at least half of those miles has been freeway riding. And I'm not talking about 65 miles per hour in the slow lane. I'm talking about 10, 11, 12,000 RPMs at 70, 80, even sometimes approaching 90 miles per hour. And the bike does fine. So this bike has plenty of passing power, or maybe I shouldn't say plenty, but it has the ability to pass cars, so don't worry about that. When I first started riding on the freeway, my number one concern is that I was going to blow up the engine, because these Ninja 250s do run at high RPMs. But after a while, I started to realize that this bike just doesn't care. It's designed to run at high RPMs. As long as you don't redline the bike, and as long as you properly maintain it, don't be afraid to approach the red line on this bike. You can go at 12,000 RPMs for hours and hours and hours. The bike just doesn't care. It's designed to run at those RPMs. Just to give you an idea, I live in the Bay Area in Northern California, and I've taken the bike to, I've ridden the bike to Southern California, which is about a 400-mile run, and back. So a total of 800 miles. That 800-mile trip I've done about 7 or 8 times with this Ninja 250, and I've taken the 5. Mostly I took the scenic route one time, but on the 5 I've done 100-degree weather, and I've done weather approaching 30 degrees. Hot weather, cold weather, it doesn't matter. The bike runs fine. And by the way, I'd never recommend that you ever ride a motorcycle in 30-degree weather. It doesn't matter what kind of gear you buy, you're going to be extremely cold. But so that is my those are my comments on freeway riding. I've also taken the bike from the Northern California Bay Area to the Mammoth area, and I took Sonora Pass, and I did that two-way trip twice. So that's about, I don't know, about 600 miles, maybe, I don't know, 600 miles. And again, the bike did fine. And by the way, if you want to do that trip, I would not recommend going into Yosemite, because Yosemite is really boring on the main road. But Sonora Pass, which is directly north of Yosemite, that is one of the best rides you can do, probably in California. So if you're going that way, I highly recommend that you take Sonora Pass. That is an incredible ride. So here is an example of the passing power of the Ninja 250. You can see that I'm starting to accelerate, and you know, this is what you can do if you want to maneuver through traffic. Again, the Ninja 250 can do this with no problem. I'm approaching a bike that's probably a 600 or maybe even a 1 liter, and I'm passing with no problem. Alright, so the next thing we're going to talk about is durability. There are people that put 40, 50,000 miles on these bikes, but there's not many people, so I have a unique position to comment on the reliability of the bike. But I also have a very unique position to comment on the durability of the bike. I don't own a garage, and so I park the bike on the street in front of my house. I do lock it to a tree. I also live right across the street from a supermarket, and the parking in the supermarket is really impacted. So there's a lot of overflow, coming in and parking on the street next to my motorcycle. To make matters worse, the street in front of my house is in a slight incline. So what happens is you've got an increased flow of traffic going around my motorcycle or parking next to my motorcycle, and you have a slight incline. So what people would do is they'd try to back up, but they'd overcompensate and slam into my motorcycle. So believe it or not, you're not going to believe this, but my bike has actually been knocked over 4 times from a standing position, and it's been slammed into another 3 times and rotated about 70 degrees. So I'm in a unique position to comment on the durability of this bike, and in almost every single case, there's been pretty much almost no significant damage, other than just things like the fairings. The fairings are very expensive. The first time it was hit, the damage was significant just because the cost of the fairings, but you don't have to replace the fairings. I just took the insurance money, and I didn't spend it on replacing the fairings. Because it just didn't seem like that was smart to spend $500 for fairings when I can just keep the insurance money. But there was a couple times where some things happened, but I don't have time to go into that. I'll maybe make a separate video just on all the times that my motorcycle was smashed into. I know people are probably thinking, are you serious? I am serious. That actually happened. There's a lot of people out there that will smash into your motorcycle if there's an increased flow of traffic. But this bike, I heard one mechanic say that you just can't kill Ninja 250s. And my impression is that that's pretty much correct. I've never actually crashed the bike while it's moving, but I can say that when these bikes fall over, they just, not much really happens to them. The handlebars get scratched, the foot pegs gets the foot sensor, whatever it's called, the bank sensor might get bent. Sometimes the mirror will snap off, but we're talking about, $20, $30 of damage. Maybe if it falls over, maybe $100 of damage at the most. But really the bike is pretty durable. So all that said, now let's go on to operating costs. I want to talk about how much it would actually cost to own one of these bikes. When it comes to insurance and registration, I don't think that my numbers would be that useful to you, because these things vary wildly depending on your record and where you live and your age. But just to let you know, I'm in my 30s. I have a perfect driving record, and I'm in California, and I paid $25 per month for this 2011. The year of the bike, how new the bike is, that really is a big part of the insurance that you're going to pay, obviously. But for this bike, I paid $25 per month with Geico for full coverage. It's not much. And I actually took the collision off because I figured I'm not even going to make a claim if the thing gets stolen or destroyed. So now I only pay about $12 per month for liability. But if you have full coverage, it comes out to about $300 per month, and registration is $300 per year. And registration for me is about $130 per year. All right, so let's get to maintenance. The most expensive maintenance that you're going to do on this bike is a valve adjustment, which is approximately $300 per year. Again, these numbers will vary. You might be able to do it for $200, or maybe if you go to a dealership, it might be $400. But roughly, it's about $300 per year for a valve adjustment. That's if you have it done by somebody else. If you do it yourself, you're going to pay $0 for a valve adjustment. You just have to buy a few special tools. And by the way, if you want to do the valve adjustment, I do have a video on this channel showing how to do every single step of a valve adjustment. And I believe it's the only video showing how to do a valve adjustment on a 4th generation Ninja 250. And I think it might be the only video on YouTube that actually shows every step of a valve adjustment. There's a lot of videos out there showing valve adjustments, but they don't show every step from taking off the fairings to putting the fairings back on. So if you do want to do the job, I have a 5-part, 5-hour series on that. And you can learn how to do it, and then it will cost you $0 for the valve adjustment. But again, that valve adjustment is the most expensive job that you're going to do for this bike, or really for any bike. And that's usually part of a full service. So usually you would do that adjustment along with some other things, and it would cost maybe $400 or $500 for a full service. The second most expensive thing is probably tires. Now, I want you to understand that I put about 7,000 to 9,000 miles on this bike every year. So I put a lot of miles on this bike. So I'm going to give you the numbers that I pay for this bike to put a lot of miles on it. But just be aware that if most people that buy these bikes, they only put maybe 2,000 or 3,000 miles per year on the bike. And so these numbers might be a lot different. And I'm going to give you some rough numbers of what you would pay if you're not putting a lot of miles on the bike. But I'm just going to start with the numbers for me. I put a new rear tire on this bike once every year. And rear tires cost roughly $70. If you go on Amazon, you can get the best price, about $70 for a rear tire. It depends on what time of the year you buy the tire. Roughly the front tires I change every 2 years, and they cost about $50. And so that's about $100. If you average that out, it's about $100 per year for tires. Now, if the next thing is drive chain and sprockets. You have to replace the drive chain and sprockets every once in a while. I replace them maybe once every year and a half. And averaging it, I buy a DID set. I get the sprockets and the chain together in one set, and that set is $100 on Amazon. So that's about as good as you can get as far as the deals. So it comes out to about $70 per year for that. And strangely, I have to replace rear brake discs on this bike. I pay about $45 per year for a rear brake disc, and I'm not really sure why the rear brake discs are always wearing down, but I don't know what to say about that. They're about $45, but you do have to buy a Chinese brake disc. And a lot of people would say, don't buy those brake discs. Well, I'm not going to pay $200 for an American brake disc. You know, if I had to pay $200 every year for a brake disc, then that would just be too expensive. So I buy Chinese ones for about $45 per year. Just be aware that if you buy one, it's probably going to take about 3 weeks, possibly a month for it to get here, because it's coming usually from China. In some rare cases, I've been able to get one from on Amazon Prime in Amazon's warehouses. But usually you have to get them from China. So the next thing is brake pads. If you buy American brake pads, they're about $30, maybe $40 per pair. But again, if you buy Chinese brake pads, they're about $7 per pair. Now again, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's stupid to use Chinese brake pads. You're playing Russian roulette with your life. And maybe I am, but I've put, probably, I don't know how many miles, maybe 30,000 miles with Chinese brake discs and Chinese pads, and I haven't had a problem. Some people have said that the pads separate from the backing plate or whatever you call it. I haven't had that happen. I've used Volair brake pads, and the actual brake disc, I don't know who makes the brake discs. A lot of times when you buy from China, they don't even tell you what the brand name is. But the next thing is chain cleaner and chain lube. I guess you'll spend about $25 per year for that stuff, depending on how careful you are when you actually apply it. And oil and filter, roughly about $40 per year. You'll probably change the oil and the filter twice per year, if you put a lot of miles on it. If you don't put a lot of miles, it's only going to be about $20 per year. Headlight bulb, I have to replace headlight bulbs approximately every 2 years. So the headlight bulbs are not that expensive, but they're about $15, so that comes out to about $7.50 per year. Again, I'm doing all of this per year. So air filter, you have to change that once every year. You can wash it if you want, but I never wash it. I just don't want to mess with that. I just buy a new one. They're really inexpensive. That's about $12 per year. And spark plugs are really inexpensive. I just replaced my spark plugs. They cost like $6.13, something like that on Amazon. And so I'm just going to round that up to $7 per year. And then some optional things that people almost never do. Fork seals. The fork seals do bust on these bikes, but I don't know if it's really that necessary to replace them. A lot of people say you got to replace them immediately. That's not my experience. I don't see why they really need to. Why it's really that important to replace them immediately. And the bad thing about fork seals is they're inexpensive, but the labor that you're going to pay to replace fork seals is approaching $200. So if you do want to replace fork seals, you're probably going to have to do it maybe once every 2 years, I guess, on these bikes. The fork seals just bust. I don't know why. But that comes out to about $100 per year. But I'm not going to include that in the maintenance, because you may not even want to do that. And the other two things I want to mention are it's stuff that's almost never done. Swing arm service and head bearing service. Those are really expensive. But I'm not going to even include that in the price, because that stuff is just never done. So if you add up all these prices, there are 4 situations. The first situation is my situation. I do all the work myself, and I put a lot of miles on the bike. Given that situation, if you add up these numbers, it comes out to about $313.50 per year to maintain the bike. So that's my situation. Now, if you do the work yourself and you have you put low miles on the bike, then it's only about $100 per year. And the third situation is if you have the work done by somebody else and you put a lot of miles on the bike, you might spend as much as $750 per year. So that's kind of the worst case scenario as far as money goes. And then if you have the work done by somebody else but you put low miles on the bike, that's about $200 per year. So those are the four situations that you're looking at. And again, the reason that it's so expensive, if you put a lot of miles on the bike and you have the work done, is because you have to pay about $300 for a valve adjustment every year. And you're going to be replacing tires, and you're going to have to pay, the labor for all the stuff. So it's roughly about $750 per year. Now, these costs do not include insurance and registration and the price of gasoline. If you add the price of insurance and registration, that's about $500 per year. And if you add the price of gas, it's about $500 if you put a lot of miles on the bike, about $500 per year. And if you don't ride the bike much, then it might just be, say, $150 per year. So if you adjust those numbers accordingly, then this is what you're looking at. And so this gives you a good estimate of the operating costs for this bike per year. So all that said, that's my 41,000 mile review of the 2011 Ninja 250. Feel free to leave comments or questions.